So I've been using the ZT-0561 for some woodworking for the past few days. It has a decent bit of power and a snap cut, and it allows me to cut small woods much easier than just trying to press or slice cut. One of the main reasons I cut them is just to get rid of them, because I'm basically trimming back weeds around land that I owned and maintained, cemetery plots, just yards and stuff like that. But in general, there's a lot of soft species in this local area, pine, juniper, fir, alder, that when they're rather young, anything below around 3 inches, is usually easy to put under tension, and then you can snap chop it relatively easy. Pine, juniper and fir usually have large green branches, which are great for building debris shelters, putting on fires to generate a lot of smoke in a hurry. And alders are very nice soft wood for construction wood for a number of materials. You can peel back the bark, you can make things out of it. This knife has the weight and heft and just raw size to do that rather effectively. And by that I mean essentially you're doing 1 to 2 hits to cut these small sticks, make a pile, and with light swings you're easily popping off all the branches, so you're producing a pile of branches and some of the main sticks. And it's much more capable than the paramilitary. This is extensively modified, rounded off the back, rounded the insides of the liners, rounded the clip, reground the blade. But this has been one of my main pocket carries for a long time. But this is much lighter in hand and doesn't have the retention around the rear for snap chopping. Kind of make an argument that I removed that when I removed the very extensive hook, but with the very extensive hook down at the bottom, the handle was actually too small for me to get a comfortable grip on. Now it's much more versatile, but even then it doesn't have the sort of weight and the power that the ZT has, so it's more for just press cutting. And even some small fixed blades, like this is an example of a small Puko. This is from Udo, but traditional Moras and similar single bevel knives, very common in bushcraft, don't have the weight to do that kind of snap chopping relatively effectively. Back to the ZT though, I did run into ergonomic issues with the snap cuts, basically how I was holding it. So you want to get a grip down towards the end of it, because of course up here you just don't have the balance that you want. The center of mass is too close to your hand, so there's no real power in rotation, and similar, you don't have any length, of course, so the increase in length increases your impact speed, and as you shift the mass out, it increases your inertia, which increases your impact energy again. So you're trying to hold back around here. The problem is when you go really far back and you get behind the clip, it's relatively comfortable around the clip part because your fingers fit just really nice in this curve. But the problem is this handle no longer fits very well into your hand. Again, you might get grip specifics, but I'm just talking about me, but I would assume a lot of this would hold in general for people with similar size and nature hands. When you clip forward in front of the clip like this, you again get that very natural contouring which fits very well in your hand, so it feels very comfortable handle wise. But you're right in front of the clip, so this becomes abrasive very fast. So what I ended up oscillating towards, and what I like to do when I'm doing this type of work, is try to see if you can turn off your sort of conscious focusing and just see what happens naturally. And I found that I would shift like this and grip like this until this became abrasive, and then I'd fall back here, in which case I'd lose accuracy and precision because I don't have as much control, but I'm not jamming this clip into my hand, and the knife itself doesn't feel as comfortable or nearly as secure. And it's one of the things again that points out, of course, to me, is how little this knife was extensively used, or if it was used at all, as opposed to just design. Because in order to solve this problem, it's relatively minor. I mean, I'm only talking about a small shift in the clip to either move it down or make it longer, And I mean, you're only talking about like a half a centimeter. Makes a relatively large difference to where how it sits in your hand and becomes really comfortable, really secure, really nice and powerful, to where it becomes sort of sloppy and loose. And again, different hand sizes may affect this. But overall, I did find that it does have a nice amount of functionality there. Now, again, you're not always going to want to be chopping stuff up when you're actually out. And what you tend to want to look for is nice wood that's already felled, that's nice and dry. Ideally, that's completely blasty, that you can just break up. But you mightn't always have that. And the nice thing about some of these trees, especially like alder, grows exceptionally fast. Almost that you can treat it as a renewable resource, and it grows in just massive, great big clumps. And it's so light because it's relatively small. Like I said, 1 to 3 inches is common, that you can very easily move it around. Oftentimes you'll hear people about cutting great big pieces of wood for the fire, and all that sounds nice and lumberjacky and everything. But the problem is, if you're not in ideal health, if you're not in ideal conditions, if you're not very familiar with it, if the weather is not ideal, trying to carry around pieces of wood that are in the nature of a couple of 100 pounds mightn't be your best idea. But it doesn't take much to carry around a small armful of 1 to 3 inch pieces of wood. And because they're so small, they dry out very rapidly, especially if you skin the bark off them. So it's rather nice in that respect to clear the wood. So again, in short, it works relatively well. And to give you sort of a more quantitative idea of the sort of chopping ability, it has enough chopping ability where I'd comfortably work through something, say like the size of a piece of 1x3 or a piece of 1x4. It would be a bit of a chore to try to chop through a piece of 2x4 size wood with it, but again, a small piece of strapping, a 1 to 3 inch piece of live wood is easily within the realm of functionality for this knife. However, to put a bit in perspective when you're talking about what you're actually carrying, again, this is pretty heavy for a folding knife. It's almost about half the weight of a Cold Steel Trailmaster MT151, and that sounds a bit absurd when you say it, because that's like a 9-inch Bowie, but that's exactly what it is. So obviously you should expect a fair bit of chopping ability for something that again weighs about 50% of an MT151 Cold Steel Trailmaster type design. So that's of course why you're getting the chopping ability, because of the weight that's actually there. So the downside of that, of course, is that you are using it well outside the realm of the warranty, well outside the realm of what the manufacturer will support. So take that for what it is. But it's one of the reasons that I tend to like and carry heavier folders at times, because it isn't always practical to carry a larger fixed blade. So having a folder that's significantly more capable than doing, say, just light cutting like this, which is the Havalon Peranta Edge, reusable scalpel blades, or even something that's heavier use than this, Spyderco matted out paramilitary. So you're moving up to something like this, which is a ZT, or something very similar, and this is the knife from a Surefire, which is a similar sort of class of this, similar in weight, similar to overall heft, and has the same sort of ability to chop woods and that kind of stuff. One thing which did strike me as kind of interesting, because I was using this sort of side by side and doing some of the work with it, this is one of, if it's not the very first knife that Surefire put out, and it has almost no handle ergonomic issues, and it looks like it might have a lot of them because of all the funky speed holes and everything that's going on with the handle. And there are some, like there's a bit of a point here, the flipper is not ideally round, that's a little bit sharp there, the clip is a bit wonky, this could be slightly rounded out, but they're all in the realm of moving from something that's already very good to something that could be very excellent. Whether it's with the ZT0561, the issues with the handle are immediately obvious, and they're uncomfortable. They're not ideal. They're very close to being sort of non-functional, and that's how abrasive that they are, that you can do one sort of hard cut and you automatically have hot spots on your hand that are close to getting painful. But with the Surefire, I've done, literally 500 cuts into wood. I've done extensive cardboard cutting with it, and it's just at the point where you sort of feel, hey, yeah, that's a bit less than ideal. And like I said, I just quickly went over some of the issues with it. The main big problem with this, of course, was the price. I mean, this was scattering around between $300 to $400 when it first came out. So there's a lot of people that said, hey, yeah, it looks like a nice knife. Got a bunch of little cool features on it, seatbelt cutter. It's got an integral wire, breaker, notcher, stripper type thing. Got a wrench there, got an adjustable wrench on the inside. Has all these nice features. Screwdriver, but that's friggin' kind of expensive for the first knife that you would put out. Surefire is kind of an expensive name anyway. But I did, again, find it rather interesting that this has, like I said, no ergonomic issues and easily works in a hammer grip, saber grip, reverse grip, ice grip, and really doesn't have anything that you would say, wow, that's really uncomfortable, aside from the fact that if you make contact with the front flipper, it's not ideal. Now, of course, you got to take into account, of course, that this part that you're actually hitting right here is also the part that you're flipping forward with. So if you round this off 100% to make it really nice and really comfortable, you might tend to slide off it as a flipper. So take that into consideration. But interesting little knife, and I'll be doing more work with this in the future. So in summary, have seen the ability for this to do, again, woodworking much more powerful, has the ability for light snap chops, which makes it much more functional. Again, this has been heavily reground, but again, ran into ergonomic issues almost immediately, and the discomfort is that high that it restricts security, and you have to change grips or it will just cut into your hand. A little bit of work could have easily changed this and dramatically improved the comfort and overall functionality of the knife.